Good evening and welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustments ZBA meeting in August 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have at 6 p.m. we have 5 members today and we have a quorum. Today we're going to have the introduction with the approval of minutes and then go into our agenda. And just to let everyone know that the regular agenda will consist of call of the public hearing to order. Then we will have the purpose of the hearing. Then we will have a staff report. Then we will have an applicant presentation. Then if any persons are wishing to speak for or against, and then we will have a staff and commission applicant discussion, and then we will have consideration and possible action. So the first thing on our agenda is approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for July?
Motion to approve ZBA meeting minutes from July 11th, 2024.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. We'd like to move into our regular agenda. Consideration and possible action, VARZ 24-15, a variance to deviate from the requirements for an on-premise ground sign. A request by Maureen Silk, applicant on behalf of the International Leadership of Texas, Incorporated, represented by Charles Klein, owner, for approval of a variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code Ordinance number 2000-T, to allow for deviations from the requirements for an on-premise ground sign. This has a general location of 2468 Broadway Street, Pearland, Texas. Do we have a staff report?
We do. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Let me introduce Patrick Bauer to provide the staff report.
Thank you, Katja. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Tonight we'll have a variance request, and the variance specifically is to deviate from the following requirements for an on-premise ground sign that's located along Broadway Street for a school. The specific deviations are for the maximum height for the sign, the maximum sign area, the actual location of it, and the size of an electronic changeable message sign. And so here's kind of a general summarization of the request. We'll kind of go through them individually, so don't feel like you need to look and read through all of it because it is a lot of words, but we'll be going through each one of the deviations in their own individual slide later on. And so to date, staff has not received any comments in favor or against the request as well. So looking at the zoning of the property as well as the surrounding properties, the zoning of the subject property is the general business district, and we see that same zoning to the north and the east. And then we see some general commercial zoning to the northwest. And then also a little bit of single family residential 4. It's that kind of darker color to the west. And then finally, there's some single family residential 1 zoning to the south. And so I will say this aerial imagery you're seeing right now is from 2022. If you were to go out there today, and many of you drove by, there is a school that's pretty much done being built on the property. So it's not a wooded lot anymore. But kind of looking at some of the surrounding uses, to the north we see a craft store just across the intersection of Broadway and Liberty, as well as an office and some undeveloped land. And then to the west is a funeral home and a church. And then to the south is the school, the elementary school, as well as City Hall and some other municipal buildings. And then to the west is the library, as well as a multi-tenant retail complex. And a little bit of history on the property. Was annexed into the city in 1960. Originally it was platted as 3 separate lots in 2017, but more recently it was replatted into 1 lot in 2023 in anticipation of developing the school. And as mentioned, currently that school is being developed right now. And here we get a look of the subject property from Broadway Street. This is a little more showing of what it looks like today, as this picture is from one of our inspectors today. And this is kind of an imagery of if I was standing at the intersection, what I could see from the intersection looking towards the property. And so here we get a look at the proposed ground sign. It includes kind of that base section is the bottom portion where you can see the address numbers. And then going towards more the top of the sign, we get the name of the school as well as Where it says Go Eagles in that black section is where the actual electronic message sign is. And then the side of the kind of brick portion kind of shows the crest of the school as well as some other information. And here we get a look at the proposed location. That East Broadway will be at the top of the image, as well as you can see where the driveway is, and that dashed line would represent the property line. And we'll be going in a little further with the actual deviation about how it compares to the requirement. And so first we're going to look at the height for the ground sign. As per the code, the maximum height permitted, as it states, is you're allowed 8 feet per the sign plus a 2-foot base. Thus you could overall have a 10-foot overall sign. And that maximum 10-foot height is represented by that green line on the image. And then per the applicant's request, they are requesting for a 15-foot 10-inch sign, which is represented by, it states 190 inches, which comes to that calculation. And approximately the actual sign area is about 11 feet, 6 inches tall. And then the actual base, where that address and kind of the gray bricking is approximately 4 feet, 4 inches tall. And looking at the sign area, we're looking specifically at the effective sign area, and how the sign area reads is you're kind of take the area that is covered by the base out of that. So you're measuring from the top point of the base to the essentially top point of the sign, and that would kind of be the effective sign area. So the effective sign area is represented by the red outline box. And so within the general business district, there's a maximum allowed sign area of 75 square feet. And the applicant's request is for 118 square feet in size. And looking at the location of the sign, per the code, the minimum setback permitted is 5 feet from the property line, which is represented by that green line running through the site. And the applicant's request is to have it 1 foot from the property line, which is represented by that red line. And it should also be noted that the proposed sign is currently located within a water sewer easement, which is represented by the blue line. And a consent to encroach will need to be approved by the engineering department prior to that final approval of the sign permit. And finally, looking at the size of the actual electronic message sign, the code states that the maximum size of we'd say an ECMS sign for short, is permitted to be 25% of the allowable sign area in the GB district. So essentially 25% of the 75 square feet. And the applicant's request is for it to be approximately 30 square feet per the proposed sign image. And that would be 40% of the allowable sign area for the GB district. But it should be noted that compared to what's actually being proposed, that actually is 25% of the proposed sign area. So 30 square feet is approximately 25% of the 118 square feet that is being proposed. And so reviewing the approval criteria for a variance, staff found that the request met 3 of the 8 criteria for approval of a variance. And specifically, the applicant has not identified an actual physical hardship associated with the subject property that would create an undue hardship or inequity if the proposed sign were to meet the Unified Development Code. Additionally, staff finds that the proposed signage is not consistent with the existing signage provided on adjacent lots that are occupied by one business, such as the funeral home to the east, as well as the church to the east. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the requested variances for an on-premise ground sign based on the approval criteria. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you so much. We'd like to move into applicant presentation. Is there an applicant available? If you would, sir, would you state your name and address and go to the podium? Thank you.
My name is Charles Klein, 2021 Lakeside Boulevard in Richardson, Texas, 75082. I am the Senior Executive Director of Construction for International Leadership of Texas. And coming before you today, first and foremost, I want to thank you for your time. Having worked at a charter school, I understand how important your job is and how many different directions you get hit up for things. So I appreciate your time and consideration in this matter. The reason we're bringing this variance request, first and foremost, is a sort of a fiduciary duty. This is just our base monument sign. We have it going in 4 different jurisdictions right now. Not to say that every jurisdiction is the same, but those jurisdictions happen to approve of it. And to redesign and get it within the criteria, it's going to cost us about $5,000. Not a lot of money, but the way we view it is it's about 2.5 interactive teaching displays in classrooms. So it's just, it's money that we have to be careful how we're spending it. So bringing that before you tonight. In addition, we did remove a giant billboard, and we're putting back a much smaller sign. So just wanted to point that out in the development of the property. And then finally, second to finally, we are a trilingual education. That's our curriculum. It's trilingual education. So one of the reasons why we like to go with a larger electronic sign is, if we can, we like to reinforce that trilingual education everywhere we can. And on that sign is where we would like to reinforce that as well. We do it inside the school, through our teaching, through our curriculum, but having 3 different languages on a sign, if it's too small, it gets very small and then it's not readable. Additionally, the traffic, a larger sign generally is safer. When it gets too small, cars can slow down to try to read things like that, and we just want to make sure that we're communicating that appropriately. We also have a lot of events that we invite the community to, and we want to be a good community neighbor. We do Chinese New Year and various other events to celebrate the trilingual education, and we do like to display that on that sign. And then the final item that I would point out is, in driving here, and I realize the zoning is different for all these properties, but having driven here this morning, I just noted that, First Church has a sign that's more than 25% of an electronic sign that's more than 25%. And of their sign, Fellowship Baptist Church, Raising Cane's, just on that one section of Broadway. So we're not trying to be ostentatious or showy. We're just trying to align this with our mission. So, any questions?
Thank you, sir. We will move into questions a little bit later. Do we have any persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? We'd like to move into staff and applicant discussion. Any questions or comments from the board to the staff or to the applicant?
Mr. Chairperson, could I suggest, since we know there's going to be a sign of some kind, would it be proper to go ahead and consider this, break this up into several different votes instead of saying yes or no to the sign completely? We might address the height issue separately from the size of the sign. What do you think?
Yes, we would definitely do that in 4 parts. That's listed. It's 3 or 4 parts, correct?
It's 4 parts.
4 parts, correct. Those 4 parts, yeah. We can definitely do that. Any questions or comments to the applicant or the staff from the board? I know I have a question. Is it, one of the things of dealing with the height, is it, if you take a layer or 2 out of the bottom, would that affect because you've taken out layers from the brick itself? Has that been something that you've been able to discuss with staff to help that height thing?
I don't know if that particular topic has been discussed. The infrastructure of the sign is a prefab steel cage,
Okay.
so it would require a little bit. It would be less of a monetary intrusion to redesign just one piece. I'd also like to point out that as far as the setback, I think we're perfectly fine adjusting the sign. I don't know why it was put right there on the property.
Because I'm looking at this right here, looking at the height.
Yep.
Because if this is just, not say just, but the bricks, then there's not put I mean, you're the engineers, would that affect a lot of things of just not taking out, having not so many different layers?
I mean, it could be designed and built,
The requirement is not related to the base, it is related to the square footage of the sign itself. So lowering the base is not going to help you. Correct.
Yeah, surface, correct. I was just trying to adjust to at least one of them for the height.
Well, the one thing about the height, they want the visibility, so the height is important to them. My concern would be if we approve this, then what's the next building going to want? And they're going to throw this back in our face. And I understand Canes and other buildings, but those were also built before the uniform code is currently read, if I remember correctly. So I understand your position, but where do we draw the line? And
But can we confirm when those signs were approved and those projects that he mentioned?
Yeah, applicant raised a good questions with an observation that there are, I guess, are nearby signs that also don't comply with the code. Is that correct?
So I noted both First Church and Raising Cane's. I missed the third one. I know Raising Cane's should be in compliance because that was construction within the past 8 years, if I recall right. I'm pretty certain on that. First Church, I honestly don't know when that sign was put up, but all of those signs should have complied. And if they are not in compliance, then we will go out there and have additional enforcement actions. But what is before you is, does this sign at this location needed a variance? And, I think staff has shown that there are a number of ways to bring this site into compliance, either by reducing the base, reducing the height. You can see that there's additional blank space in between where their seal is and where the additional text for the variety of languages that they teach in. So those shouldn't really be in effect to bring the height and bring the sign overall into compliance.
So
also one thing that I would point out is even if I'm not mistaken, our high schools, both schools, Dawson and Pearland, I don't think they have a sign this big, either school. So
That would be correct.
okay, we're talking the high school versus a smaller school.
Question for the applicant, if I can. Our notes here say that the proposed sign is to be 118 square feet in the area. If we lowered the sign, would that have anything at all to do with the square footage of the printed portion there that's outlined in red? Is there some sort of ratio where you shrink the size if you lower it, or does the height have anything to do with the actual sign size there?
If we lower it, it wouldn't necessarily change the sign size, but he is correct. I mean, there are some white space areas that we can, again, we would just need to redesign and reduce them. I don't know, the sign square footage is within that sign, not the base. So even if we took out of the base,
Okay.
the sign would still be the same.
Okay, good. Thank you.
yeah, that's what I was saying. Just take out the base. That will reduce the size. For the height, but then you're still able to keep. Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if I'll make anybody mad here about what I'm fixing to say, but when I was on planning and zoning board, the one thing that we heard at every planning and zoning meeting was we need less signage. We need to look more like other certain cities, and I won't mention those cities, but the signage is a huge thing in our community. So if we let this one be 15 foot tall, and then the next one wants 16 foot, and then the next guy wants 19 feet, and the next lady wants 22 feet, where does it stop or start? So my heart goes out to you as a business owner to business owner, but I can't vote for this in any way, shape, or form.
So does anybody have, for as the, could you move to the next section? No, I'm sorry, the setback. Right.
If I heard from the applicant correctly, they're okay, they don't need the setback.
Yeah, I
Okay.
apologize. I don't know if our architects put it I don't know why that's there. So the setback, I think we have plenty of space that we could move it.
Okay, so we don't need to vote on the setback then. I guess we still need to vote on the setback.
You would still vote on it, but you would move for denial because it's not necessary.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure. Okay,
The setback is 5 feet, that's required, right?
correct.
And they would still leave it in the easement.
Yes, and we see that often, and it's more engineering will review it, and Lawrence can correct me if I'm wrong here, and they'll look to see, hey, is this going under a water line or something, or does it need to be moved slightly? But we see often if you go up and down Broadway or any of these roads, you'll see there's plenty of signs that are close to the road, but it's more, where is it compared to like the actual utility lines? So that's where they're trying to keep it probably away from those. But it still is maybe a 25-foot water sewer easement, I believe. So it's still, if the line was right there, engineering will review to say, hey, you need to move it a little further so that we don't have it right on top of the line potentially.
And you've already had that discussion with, and you know exactly where you can put it properly, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Any other questions, comments? Any other questions or comments from the board?
Can I ask a question, and don't laugh when I ask this? Tell me what ECMS stands for, please.
That's the electronic changeable message sign. Essentially, all the electronic signs you see that they stay there for a second and then they move on to the next one, and then they.
Well, I should have known that, shouldn't I have?
When you see an acronym, it
Common term.
doesn't click.
It's a fancy word for electronic reader board.
So Gary, to your first statement, do we need to separate the items?
Well, I don't, in my opinion, is there anybody here that just says yes or no 100% one way or another, everything combined? I think we ought to, there's going to be a sign, so how can we not vote on?
Well, if we don't approve the sign, then the other ones are mute.
The other ones are mute.
Yeah, I mean, is anybody here going to say, nope, you can't have a sign? Nope, okay. So
My vote is no.
you can't have any kind of a sign at all.
Oh, you can
Now you
have a
can have a
sign,
sign,
it just
it's-
has to meet the requirements.
It's a
that's all.
problem.
And if I can
I have no
help
problem.
clarify on that, it's not whether or not you have a sign or don't have a sign. It's whether you have a sign that complies with the Unified Development Code or whether you have a sign that is granted variances from the Unified Development Code.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Now, I blame the planning commission for not allowing larger signs, quite frankly.
I wasn't on it when that was decided, so.
Okay, just no other questions? Or
How do we want to do that then? If
we do it
just
all
say
together?
One vote.
One vote, yes.
One vote.
I heard that there were going to be at least 2 no votes, or that's what I understood. So
what I
if there are at least 2 no votes and you need a supermajority to get anything passed, it would be more efficient to do it all as one.
Yes.
Exactly. So, since there are no other questions or comments to the applicant or the staff, we'd like to move into consideration of possible action. Jerry, would you read the
Yes, sir.
motion?
I make a motion to approve the variance number 24-15 as presented.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion is denied 5-0, or 0-5, excuse me. We'd like to move into consideration and possible action for extension request for ZBA application VARZ 24-04. This is a request by Tri Ming Cao, applicant on behalf of Donald W. Jordan, owner, for approval of an extension of an already approved variance as permitted by the Unified Development Code, ordinance number 2000-T, to reduce the landscape buffer for a non-residential use that has a side or rear continuous to any residential use or residential zoning district. This has a general location of 9914 Camelot's Court, Pearland, Texas. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So as mentioned, this request is for an extension of an already approved variance. And specifically, this request was heard at the May 2nd, 2024 meeting. And the request specifically had to pertain to a non-residential use that had some existing buildings that were previously not permitted, as well as they were proposing some additions to the property to kind of enclose some storage areas. And those existing buildings and the proposed expansions were encroaching into the landscape buffer. And so the request was to approve for them to encroach, but they would still be providing all the required landscaping that would normally be required under the codes to still screen it. But the board approved that at the May 2nd, 2024 meeting. And so the UDC has an expiration requirement that within 90 days, the applicant is either to submit a building permit kind of for the improvements on the property, or they may request an extension. And so currently that variance is to expire on August 2nd, 2024. And so since that meeting, the applicant has been working through those improvements. They have been working mostly on comparing the quotes for the improvements. I know some of them were conditions that were added into the request. So some of those things may not have been things that they previously had put into their scope of work. So they were kind of doing a comparative cost analysis of who they may hire. And now the applicant is ready to start working on their plans and kind of getting the site up to conformance. However, as mentioned, that expiration is coming up. So to give them more time to actually work on the plan set, they're requesting the extension to extend that time. And so the board does have the ability to extend variances up to 1 year from that original approval date, which would put the future approval around May 2nd, 2025, if the board were to approve. And so staff believes that the applicant has shown good cause and demonstrated their intent to pursue a building permit with their actions. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the extension of the expiration date of the variance to go to May 2nd, 2025. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you. Is there an applicant presentation? Would you please go to the podium and state your name and address?
Good afternoon. My name is Tri Minh Cao, and the address is 9914 Camelot Court, Pearland, Texas, 77584.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Anything you want to say for as an applicant?
Did you have a presentation, or are you just here to answer questions if they have some?
Yeah, I'm just here to answer the question.
Oh.
I'm just asked for extension, so I got time for me to get the Shellmark engineer to working on the parking driveway. That's what we need more time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Is there any persons wishing to speak for or against proposal? We'd like to move into staff applicant discussion. Any questions or comments from the board to the staff or the applicant? No questions or comments. We'd like to move into consideration and possible action. Don, would you read the motion, please?
For a variance, 24-04.
It's been motioned. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been motioned and second. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries 5-0. And that concludes the Zoning Board of Adjustments meeting for August 2024. It is 6:30 p.m. Adjourned.
Good job.
Thank you.